It's time for the Larry H. Miller Utah Summer Games at Southern Utah University in Cedar City. Register today to participate in the 40th anniversary season of a Utah sports tradition at utahsummergames.org. Participate in over 50 sports around the state. Then plan to join the opening ceremonies Friday, June 5th, presented by State Bank of Southern Utah. Register today to participate in the 40th anniversary season of the Larry H. Miller Utah Summer Games. Looking for music that lifts your spirit and fills your heart? Experience the powerful sound of the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square. Now streaming on all your favorite music platforms. Find the Tabernacle Choir on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, Amazon Music, and Pandora. Let the music of the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square inspire you today and every day. Whether you're at home, in the car, or on the go, enjoy the beauty of their world-renowned sound anytime. The Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square, streaming now.
Covering the Utes better than anyone else. This is Ute Insider Steve Bartle of KSLSports.com on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Trajan Wealth brings you this portion of the program, TRAJANwealth.com, for all your trusted local needs in retirement. Go to TrajanWealth.com. There you go. So, we were just having this discussion. First of all, Steve Bartle, you heard your own intro, so you need no introduction, but we always still keep introducing you. So thanks for joining us, man.
We love the dramatics.
I know. How has practice been shaping up? Because at some point it becomes routine. Some of the player availabilities and all that stuff, it just kind of ends up finding a little bit of a rhythm in the spring, and it's pretty short-lived, but you have to try to learn a lot about a new regime in a pretty short amount of time. And what's been the thing that has stood out to you about the coaching staff now that it's made the changeover versus just the players? Because we focus on those guys, but I want to know what the feeling has been like with all the coaches you're able to intersect with now that Morgan is top of the spear, man.
Yeah, it's been there's been a lot to learn about Utah football this spring, and the coaching staff is definitely a significant part of that. And to start at the top with Morgan Scally, it's been interesting to get a feel for, how he's going to operate as a head coach, and watching him this spring. And man, we got a lot of opportunity to be up at practice this year compared to previous years. Watching Scally, he was, he obviously knew when he needed to speak up and get on guys, but he allowed the other coaches to coach, and it wasn't overwhelming. And in that where, we've watched him for the last couple of years as the defensive coordinator, and you often, he's one of the loudest guys at practice, getting on his guys and that. But we didn't get a lot of that this year, which was interesting. And then, from there, I thought Colton Swan gradually, I just said that, Scally was one of the loudest guys in practice, previous years. And over the span of 5 weeks, I'm pretty sure if you could have averaged the decibel level of Swan's voice over those 5 weeks, that it would have incrementally increased each and every week. Just him becoming more vocal and kind of finding his footing and finding his voice as a defensive coordinator, I thought was interesting to follow that throughout spring. And then with Kevin McGivern, he's kind of the quiet guy. But each of these guys, watching them interact, there's an interesting camaraderie between the entire staff. I think this is a group that is really excited to be at Utah, to be working together, and I think it's a group that really fits well with Morgan Scally and what he's trying to build at Utah.
So Shehan Jayaraju, who's a friend of the program, great writer for CBS Sports, just published his Big 12 bold predictions for 2026, and we did a segment on it previously. That's why I'm bringing it up here. But I wanted to get your take on what he said about Utah. I got it right here. He talked about the passing attack, and his bold prediction is the passing offense will rank in the Big 12's bottom three. Now, I pulled up the stats. They were 11th last year in passing, so it's not that big of a difference. But agree or disagree with that? And what do you think this passing game needs to do for this offense to take off in 2026?
Yeah, excited to actually talk to Shahan about that next week on my podcast. So we'll be doing that for sure. Because it was interesting reading that and seeing what we've seen the last 5 weeks up at practice. I don't want to call it an air raid that Utah is going full air raid, but we saw a lot of passing game. It was really interesting, and we saw a lot of receivers making plays and being involved, and so just in that sense, right, based on what we've seen in spring, that bold prediction is really, really bold, if you want to put it that way, I guess. We saw again, a lot of really good things with the quarterback position, with the wide receiver position. It seems like Utah feels really good about, a top four of Braden Pagan, Larry Simmons, Kyrie Scholes, and Ricky Johnson, who we don't talk about a lot, but he was a receiver that actually followed Coach Bumpus from Mississippi State. They feel really good about that, and they're seeing development of guys even beyond those four, where you're getting a Nate Johnson who's fully committed to wide receiver, and Bumpus really kind of investing in his development, made a lot of plays. Like for 2 weeks, Nate Johnson was the buzzword in camp, just with the plays that he was making both in the air, like genuinely looking like a wide receiver. We watched him last year kind of operating as a gadget type of a guy, and it was not that. He was running routes. He was making plays down the field. It was that type of transformation for him. So
that is such a crazy story. Like, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like when you think about people coming full circle in the college football world and just the narrative of his story and where he is now, it's wild, and it's awesome to hear his name there, because everybody knows how phenomenal of an athlete he is. I just love that he's getting that type of love, and hopefully it translates too, and we get to see a lot more of him.
Yeah, 100%. It is genuinely, like, it caught all of us by surprise watching him consistently make plays when we were up there. So, just based on that, it'll be a lot of fun to talk to Shahan next week about his bold prediction.
Well, to build on that, Devin Dampier last year, 2,490 yards, 24 touchdowns, just 5 interceptions, a QBR of 84.4. What can he do? What's the next level for Devin Dampier as a senior at Utah at quarterback?
Yeah, good question, JJ. Obviously, Dev proved that he can produce in the Big 12, right? And you look at the numbers, his interception to touchdown ratio improved immensely from the previous year, and that was a big talking point last year. But this season, it's about the little details. It's about the not just making plays, but it's how you get to making those plays. It's the process in which you get there that I think Utah is tweaking and really trying to develop with Dev, where he's becoming more of a complete quarterback. And I think a big thing with Dampier, when you're talking about him as a passer last season, obviously at his size, there's certain limitations. He doesn't have the advantage that quarterbacks at 6'2" and 6'3" have, where they can see deep down the field. But I think with even beyond that, Dev, keep in mind that he was battling through, 2 sports hernias that he had surgery on after the season, and those limited his ability to push the ball downfield with consistent velocity. And so I think that's been something that we've seen in spring ball, where it does look better coming off of his hand when he makes those deep throws. And I think that's an area, when you're talking about just pure production, where Dev definitely needs to improve on those throws of 20-plus yards. But in terms of just how he's operating as a quarterback, it's going to be a lot more on his plate this season. He's going to need to be much more cerebral in how he approaches the game, and a lot of that, what we gained from talking to Coach McGivern and Coach Ryan Gunderson, who's the quarterback assistant. A lot of that process is pre-snap identification and understanding where your advantages are going to be. So, the next few months for Dev is going to be really important for him to get a complete grasp of the offense and what they're trying to do, right? What they're being asked to execute. But then too, also gaining a deeper understanding of defenses and opposing defenses that they're going to see this season. That way he can get a head start on, that process and go into the season ready to operate in that sort of complete quarterback mode.
Steve, on the flip side of the offensive question about the bold prediction from Shehan about the passing game, there's a team that led everybody else in the conference. The second team was almost 1,000 yards behind Utah in rushing. Obviously, they don't want to get away from that because that sets everything else up. And in the case of Utah last year, it's what beat every other team up that they were able to beat. And so a lot of talk about Jordan Gross, what it looks like with him in the first year as the offensive line coach. From a personnel perspective, I have no doubt, first of all, that Jordan Gross knows how to coach people about how to play offensive line. But from a personnel standpoint, how much of a step back do you have from last year versus because of all the talent or the experience at the very least and the talented guys that were there versus now that Jordan Gross has to work with?
Yeah, there's going to be a drop-off when you lose 2 first-round offensive tackles and, 3 other linemen that had a combined, 7,500 snaps under their belts. And a lot of those snaps were actually played together over the past 2 seasons, as that starting unit. So, there is going to be a drop-off because that experience, you just can't you can't replace it, right? It's just that thing that you just develop as you go out and you play these games. You just develop a greater sense of confidence and understanding of the game. And so regardless of what Jordan Gross and Alex Gerke do to develop these guys, there is still that lack of experience that is just going to be a process that this offensive line unit is going to have to go through and work through. So from that perspective, there's going to be a drop-off in terms of, what you can expect in the sense of, the chemistry and that sort of thing. And then beyond that, I do think there are some good pieces in place for Gross to work with here. And, there were a couple of offensive linemen that were operating as like 6th and 7th linemen in certain jumbo packages last year, and that was Soloto Amoyai and Keith Olson. To have those 2 guys, in this group this season, I think is really helpful. I think both played about 200 to 300 snaps, which isn't it's about half of what a starting lineup typically plays, a little more than half, but still that experience and gaining that is valuable for them where they can kind of come in and be viewed as kind of the leaders in that room. And then there have been others that have stepped up. Zeraway Williams has been a bright spot at tackle. And then, Ike Garcia, the former Corner Canyon standout, unfortunately, he's battled through injuries the last 2 seasons. Finally, was back on the field this spring, and, it was a process for him. But over the last couple of weeks, really kind of found his footing and got into a groove where he's stringing together, good periods after good periods and then good full days of practice as well. So, it's going to be a process. There's going to be a drop-off from what Utah was able to enjoy last year up front. But I think there are still good pieces in place where this offensive line unit can still work together pretty cohesively. And given what you have in Devin Dampier back there, right, coming from New Mexico and what he had to overcome with that offensive line there, he's going to be very, very, I don't want to say comfortable, but he has that experience of operating with an offensive line that, isn't providing him 6 and 7 and even 8 seconds in the pocket. So that is going to be, again, something that falls on Dev as well to kind of gain a greater feel for what he's going to need to do and how he needs to operate. But again, getting back to the offensive line, I think there are good pieces and there was good development over the course of spring in that group.
Semi Talonga has gone viral recently, and we saw him last year, so it's really not a surprise to people that follow Utah closely. But, of course, we know how social media goes. Like, oh, wow, this guy's huge, and he's catching passes. But it is quite a thing that Utah has there. What do we make of this Rhino roll, and how much could they use it next season?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to get a better feel for what that is going to look like next season.
He does look faster. He does look faster this year, by the way.
20 yards, dude. That's a pretty good game for a big man.
Absolutely.
So it'll be interesting, right? I think that Rhino roll has been something that Utah really embraced under Andy Ludwig when they brought in Logan Kendall from Idaho, and then continued to utilize other defensive linemen in that role, Mickey Suguturaga. That was something that was born under Andy Ludwig and has continued, last season under Coach Beck. And I think Coach McGiven, just kind of given his first exposure to this role and to these guys, I think, he talked about it on Wednesday that he was really impressed with what they were able to do, what they're capable of doing. And, it may not be to the same extent that we see these guys utilized. Speaking of Semi Talonga and Sione Motuapuaka, but I still think these guys will be involved. These guys are still key pieces to the run game. And as we've seen, right, Semi is pretty comfortable, stepping up and making plays in the passing game when he needs to. So I think it is something where I don't necessarily expect the same sort of usage, but I do think it is something that Kevin McGiven is going to utilize this season. Just don't know for sure because it's not something that he's used in the past. So there's going to be a meeting in the middle with that, and I think it's still going to be something that we see next season.
Steve, as you watch the team develop in spring, and we make way too much about some of the things that go on in spring, and we probably don't focus on the things that matter the most. After spring, are there going to be more discussions? I would assume there'll be more discussions with some guys who they don't feel like are going to be going forward in the program. And that's kind of become a new weird wrinkle, too, for these coaches where – But from what we've heard, too, the roster paring down is not going to be enforced like it has been in the past. Or how is that going to work with the new round of guys hitting the transfer portal and trying to make sure your numbers are at a certain place?
Well, I don't think we have a spring portal window this year. I think that's a thing of the past.
Oh, they do. Yeah, eliminated. So then what do you do with the guys?
You don't have to worry about it.
You have the conversation with the guys. They're just not coming back in the fall. Those are the conversations with the guys that don't fit on the team.
You have those conversations now, after
December.
the season and in the winter portal window. That's when you have those conversations.
What does it look like with the way that the team is set up and the way that this offense is set up to where you see that Kevin McGiven has one of the things that Shehan pointed out, he said this offense under Kevin McGiven has had so many different types of offenses, he doesn't know really what he wants to do all the time. You said it looks a little bit more like it's that traditional spread, and maybe not to go as far as the air raid, but is he a guy that could give the Utes a 3,000-yard rushing season as the offensive coordinator, or do you think he goes, I don't love that, I want to be able to get the ball in the air more?
Yeah, no, I think when you look at McGiven's, history, he's had, top 10 passing offenses at San Jose State. He's also had, I can't remember exactly where, but there was a rushing attack one of those years at San Jose State that was among the best in the country as well. So he's talked about it and adapting to your personnel. And I think there is, a good marriage between what McGiven brings to the table with, the passing game, but then, too, what Utah is bringing to the table with the offensive line and the guys that have been in that room and are expected to step up, the running backs you have in Wayshawn Parker and Daniel Bray, and we just talked about that Rhino role and how important that is for the running game as well. So there is going to be this sort of marriage of, what Utah brings to the table with the rushing attack and the history there and the tradition there with McGiven and his experience, and what he's been able to do with the quarterback position, the passing game. So I think there is going to be, quite a bit of both, where we see these spread formations, we see these jumbo packages still, and just kind of finding that balance. And that's something that I think is going to be really important. We've seen a lot of passing game this spring, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the offense and that's it, right? Like, there's still a lot of practice that we haven't been able to watch. And so, I just think with what you have in Wayshawn and Daniel Bray, and even beyond those guys, you still want to get them involved. You still want them to be effective in the run game and to find that balance. And with Dev and with Bird, that also is going to continue to be a thing in this offense as well. So, you're still striving for balance between the passing game and the run game. I just think it's going to be really interesting to see what that looks like compared to the offensive formations and schemes and personnels that we've seen, in recent history at Utah, where it has been so tight end heavy and more tailored to the run game. I think it's still going to be balanced, but just more of an embracement of the spread stuff.
If it ain't broke, run for 3,000 yards again. Like, come on. There's a little bit of that, too, where you go, hey, you've got all this talent. Don't screw it up by making it too weird. So, Steve Bartle, Ute Insider, looking forward to the Ute Blogcast because of the arrival of Shehan Jeyarajah. We'll be up to date.
We'll pop the popcorn.
Dude, that'll be fun.
We're gonna listen to that one. You just as you turn up the heat and you put the lamp and you point the lamp at him and you go, what were you talking about? Steve, as always, thanks, man, for joining us. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you again.
Okay, sounds good, fellas. Appreciate you guys.
There you go. Steve Bartle.
This episode is brought to you by Intuit QuickBooks Bill Pay. You didn't start a business to spend your Sundays chasing invoices and manual data entry. But as you grow, accounts payable starts to feel like a full-time job you never applied for. Bills pile up, approvals get lost in email, and your vendors are constantly asking, "Where's my check?" It's distracting, it's stressful, and it's keeping you from the work that actually moves the needle. Intuit QuickBooks Bill Pay is the exit ramp. QuickBooks Bill Pay automates the busy work that eats your calendar by bringing every bill, every vendor, and every payment into one organized dashboard. Stop chasing details and start seeing the big picture. Know exactly what's due, who needs to sign off, and how it impacts your cash flow before the money leaves your bank. Vendors can even manage their own details, so you stay in control of how and when you pay. Grow with confidence and put your AP on autopilot in QuickBooks. Learn more at quickbooks.com/billpay. Again, that's quickbooks.com/billpay. Terms apply. Money movement services are provided by Intuit Payments, Inc., licensed as a money transmitter by the New York State Department of Financial Services.
Derek Overstreet, founder of the New Millennium Group. We're a financial planning firm. We have advisors standing by right now to take your call. 888-999-6370. The reason you're going to want to call is we're going to help you retire 3 to 5 years before you thought possible. The way we do this is by putting together a step-by-step plan. So if you're one of those people listening and you'd like a plan in writing, give us a call at 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370, or go to utahsfinancialplanner.com.